Hello, and welcome to Strange Dominions, where we attempt to unlock the mysteries behind the unseen and the unheard, the unknown and the unknowable. I am your host, Octavian Graves. I made a post on Instagram talking about a specific topic we would be talking about throughout September and October. That topic is traditional witchcraft, and to kick that off, we will be speaking tonight with Nedelea Kennedy. Nedelea is a YouTuber and traditional witch. We speak about traditional witchcraft, her practice, her experiences, and her YouTube channel. If you have seen something strange or unusual, such as a spirit, cryptid, UFO, or anything in between, please send me an email at strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com and you could be on the show. If you are enjoying the show and want to get extra content, such as extra episodes, merchandise, and the chance to be on the show, you can sign up for our Patreon, starting at just $4 a month. Just go to patreon.com/strangedominions and sign up for any tier you would like. With that, let's get into the episode. All right, tonight I am with Nedelea Kennedy, YouTuber and traditional witch. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am super psyched about this interview. I have been watching your channel for, a couple weeks now, getting into traditional witchcraft and learning a lot about it, and it is so informative, and you are such a joy to watch, honestly.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So where did this all start for you? Traditional, witchcraft and traditional witchcraft. How did you get into it?
It's been a journey. It started when I was 19. I grew up Roman Catholic and was knew that was not for me once I hit very young, but even at 14, 15, I was like, no, this really isn't my jam. And I was 19 in university and I read an article, something that mentioned Wicca, and I'm like, that's interesting. Witchcraft, what? And then I was at a local bookstore and they had Scott Cunningham's Guide for the Solitary Practitioner. And I mean, this was back in 1998. And yeah, it all sort of started there. And I knew right away Wicca wasn't really my thing, but the idea of witchcraft grabbed me. And so I started out very reactionary to my Catholic upbringing. So it was very much all about the goddess and I don't know, but it never really sunk in with me. I was just I dabbled for many, many, many years, came and went. I always sort of came back to witchcraft, but I never really found anything that stuck until about 2018 when I was just browsing around and I found an article online about traditional witchcraft and I went, oh, wait, that sounds like my kind of thing. And so I did a bit of research and I started reading Treading the Mill by Nigel Pearson. And at the time it was out of print and I could only find PDF copies online. And I don't know if you've ever tried to read a photocopied PDF of a book on your phone, but that's what I was doing. And funnily enough, Llewellyn had the rights to publish that book and they published it in early 2020. I believe it was early 2020. And I was like, oh my goodness. They published that. They published some of Gemma Gary's work. And it really, I started, and then Keldon's book, The Crooked Path, a guide for the a guide to traditional witchcraft. And it all sort of just took off from there. It just was this weird accumulation of events that all kind of happened all together. Oh, and Laura Tepes-Zakroff, her book, Weave the Liminal, was instrumental. And I all of a sudden there were these resources popping into my life screaming at me, this is what you've been looking for all this time. And sure enough, yeah, it kind of stuck, and traditional witchcraft has definitely become my jam, if you will.
Well, that's really awesome. I've had my own set of synchronicities with traditional witchcraft since I started researching it. When it comes to YouTube, how did that start? What was the impetus for that?
So in late 2019, I was I had sort of a calling, if you will, a calling from the gods to share my voice. The message was loud and clear. You need to share your voice. You need to share your talents. And I was like, okay, great. And so in January of 2019, I was going around actually looking for a place to teach witchcraft here in my city. And as we all know, early 2019, the pandemic hit. And it was like, that just vetoed anything in person. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of disappointing. And I had a little bit of, that, well, I guess maybe it's for the best, because I'm like, who knows me? Nobody knows me. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I start a YouTube channel? If I start a YouTube channel, I can start sharing my thoughts and ideas. And maybe one day that can build into teaching witchcraft, but I'll have this sort of public repository so people can come and meet me and know who I am and what I'm about. And it just sort of, grew from there. It was really just about sharing my voice. And I felt like a lot of the voices in traditional witchcraft were men's voices. Not that that's wrong, but I was like, where's the women's voices? Where, I want to hear from other women who are doing this and how they're finding it and what they're doing. And I thought, well, if I can't really find a lot of it, maybe it's time to add my voice to the mix. So that's sort of how it got started.
Well, that's really awesome. And your channel is just it's so informative. And I don't know, do you have experience in front of a camera? Because you seem so natural when you're talking about it, when you're doing your channel. Like there's no hesitation. You look very at home when you're doing it.
I one shot all my videos. But I do have a little bit. It's not so much being videoed on camera, but I have a whole sales background, and a lot of it was online, and I did a lot of online teaching. So I'm comfortable talking to a camera.
Okay, that's really remarkable. I still have, I'm not even on camera, and I still struggle with my microphone. So, hats off to you. So, for those who may not know, and I don't know everything, I've only started researching it within the last 2 or 3 weeks. What is traditional witchcraft in your opinion? And, where did it really start? Is it, because I know that it had the, even though it's called traditional witchcraft, a lot of what traditional witchcraft does started in the 60s.
Yes.
So maybe you could just talk about its origins and history.
For sure. So traditional witchcraft, a lot of people hear traditional witchcraft and they think, oh, it's what the witches were doing back in the day. And it's not. I mean, unfortunately, the name traditional sort of implies this long, unbroken lineage, which isn't true. It started in the 50s with a man named Robert Cochrane. And it was almost in direct contrast to Gerald Gardner and his brand of Wicca, which Gerald Gardner was becoming very public in the late 50s, early 60s. This is what witchcraft is. And not everybody agreed with him. And one of those men was Robert Cochrane, also known as Roy Bowers. And he was like, no, there's this whole other way of doing witchcraft that you're sort of, I think you're wrong. I think this is what real witches do. And that's actually where the original sort of witch wars started, with Wicca versus traditional witchcraft. Hopefully we're over that all today and we can all just sort of be happy and live in the same sphere. But that's where it started, with Robert Cochrane. And basically what traditional witchcraft is I always say there's like 6 tenets. So the first one is it's non-Wiccan. The second one is that it's based on folklore. Folklore being things like stories, songs, poems, kind of all those sort of documented folklore pieces. Could be recipes, could be crafts. And a big part that a lot of us use are the witchcraft trial documents, to, pull lots of great information in there about what did we think witches were doing back in the 15, 16, 1700s. So there's a component where it's based on folklore. It is about doing operative magic, so like down and dirty spellcraft, spellcraft that works. It's like peeing in jars and pacting with spirits and just getting her done. And when we say operative magic, that is also to say it's not about like celebratory ritual. Now, as a traditional witch, you can have celebratory ritual as part of your practice, but that's not what defines it as traditional witchcraft. It is about working with spirits, both here and in the other world, right? We do spend time flying out or hedge crossing, or as some people like to call it, astral projecting, and spending time in the other world where we can work on building those relationships with spirits, but we also do it here in this world. And finally, there's a really strong component of building a relationship with the land that you live on. and really getting to know sort of the land upon which you live.
Yeah, and that's the thing that really speaks to me about it, because I already do a lot of some basic offering type stuff. I am a devotee of Hecate, and I do often offering rituals out in the woods to her and to the land spirits of the woods and things like that. And I'm curious about the folklore aspect a lot, because we have a lot of folklore. I'm in Maryland, United States, and we have a lot of, we have a good bit of folklore about the paranormal, but also witchcraft and witch trials in Maryland around the 1600s. And I'm curious about the folklore in Canada, where you're from. What have you discovered, or have you digged into that at all about witchcraft in Canada during the early 1600s and late 1500s?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, there wasn't really witchcraft in Canada in the 1500s. There really wasn't a lot of Canada existing at that point in time. So what a lot of us here do is, because the land upon which we live is not our land. It's stolen land. I am a descendant of colonizers. I live on Indigenous land, and the Indigenous lore isn't for me. That's not for me. I'm Caucasian through and through. I'm a descendant of colonizers, so it's not mine to touch. So what I do, and what a lot of practitioners here do, is we look back at our own personal ancestry. So where did my people come from? And then I work with the sort of the lore and the legends from there. So I'm predominantly Scottish, like 57% Scottish. So on both sides of my family, I hail back to Scotland. So I have a very Scottish looking practice when it comes to my personal work. And what I like to do is I'll take charms and folklore and such from Scotland, but then I rework them for the land that I live on. So a very common one that's easy to translate is the rowan berry, right? Working with rowan wood, rowan berries, and red thread. We do have rowan trees here in where I live. That's not a problem. So that ties into the land I live upon. But sometimes it will, you'll find a spell or a charm that calls for something that doesn't grow in my area of the world. So part of what I do is I then find sort of a suitable substitute that would come from my landscape. So it comes from the land that I live on that would substitute for whatever this charm was back from the homeland, if you will. But yeah, we don't have a lot of lore here about witchcraft. Even I had a friend of mine asking me about like cryptid lore, and where I live, I live in like Edmonton, Alberta. There's not a lot here. There is some in the Okanagan, but that's like a 5, 6, 7 hour drive away from where I live. So it's not particularly local to me. Yeah, Canada's a strange beast up here.
Yeah, my occasional co-host lives in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I know that he works a lot in the woods and forests up there, and he's told me a lot about some of the cryptid activity that are up there, and that's a big thing with me. And I'm curious about when we talk about folklore, and I'm glad you brought up cryptids. The spirits that you communicate with in traditional witchcraft, are they usually, can you decipher what their origin is, if they're just, land spirits, or if they're, something else, or, how, and also the contact you have with them, is it ever visual? Is it ever, direct, or does it come about in other ways?
So for me, I work with all sorts of different spirits. I work with ancestral spirits. I work with familiar spirits. I work with, definitely a lot of it is working with the spirits of the land. So like the individual land wights, the sort of plant spirits of, all the different plants and the rocks. It's a very animistic view I have. Right? Everything has spirit. So working with all of those different spirits, like the willow tree in my front yard, I've got these huge boulder stones in my backyard. They're a very like protective spirit in my immediate area, working with like the genius loci of like my home and my home area of my neighborhood, my city. So those are some of the spirits that I work with. I haven't dabbled a lot, but I mean, some people get into working with like the goetic spirits, right? You could work with deity spirits. There's all sorts of different levels and different types of spirits you can work with. I find for most people, the most accessible spirits are your plant allies, right? A lot of people, as a witch, you're doing a spell and you're adding in lavender for calming properties. Well, when you take that lavender, what I like to do is just like breathe on it to sort of imbue it with a life force. And then I'm connecting it with the spirit of the lavender plant to imbue its virtues of calmness into my working. So a lot of people I think are working with spirits and don't really recognize it as such. They're like, oh, I'm just putting ingredients in a spell. But really what you're doing is you're calling in those spirit allies from those plants to come and work with you. So that's sort of, a little bit about spirits. I find for me when I work with them, it's very, for the most part, it tends to be very, I don't even know what the word is. It's like, it's a feeling. Do you know what I mean? I get a feeling.
Like an intuitive thing?
Yeah, it's very intuitive. It's very like I'll sit with a plant and, can I harvest some, and I'll get a gentle pull forward for a yes or gentle push backwards for no. I find for it's much more subtle than I think a lot of people are looking for. I don't have a spirit sit down beside me and go, hey, I'm Joe, how you doing? Right? Like it's much more subtle than that. And sometimes it's just a feeling. I have an ancestor that I work with, and we communicate. Right? I sit in front of my ancestral altar, and sorry, my dog's having a good scratch right now, if you can hear her. If I sit with my ancestral altar, I will ask a question or I'll say something, and a response just pops into my head. It's not of my own creation. I wasn't sitting there going, oh, I think he says yes. Just I get a feeling, this overwhelming feeling, this resounding yes, just sort of clings into my head. So that's probably, that interaction is probably the most tangible experience I've had working with spirit, where I get an actual answer in my head.
Okay, very cool.
I was just saying I should share about the time that my servitor quit on me. That was a very tangible result.
Oh yeah, please do. Now that's a curious thing, because usually when I hear servitor, I'm usually hearing that from a psychological perspective. And I'm curious, are you using that in the same sense, that it's kind of like from your subconscious, or?
So yeah, there's two schools of thought on how you can create a servitor, right? You can create it out of like energy, out of a thought form of your own. The way I tend to look at it more is I put out like a job advertisement, because the way I view the world is there are spirits everywhere, just like there are people everywhere. And a lot of them are sort of those lower level spirits that don't really get all the fun playtime, right? They haven't built up any sort of big presence in the occult community, so people don't call on them per se, but they're still around us all the time. And so the way I kind of look at it is, it was sort of like making a job offer, right? Hey, here's a job I have, here's the job description. Who would like to come and do it for me? A spirit steps in and says, yes, I would like to do that for you, gain some experience points, if you will. And right, I spent some time, okay, what's your name? What's your, what is your mark? What is your, do you have a sigil? Do you have something that I can call you by? And we did some sort of back and forth with that, and established sort of a contract of, I will do A, B, and C if you do X, Y, and Z for me. So maybe not necessarily your traditional, right.
Well, I like that a lot better. I am very much on the spirit model of things.
Yeah, I just, to me, that made more sense. I understand what people are saying when they're like creating sort of these entities, but I don't know. It just clicked more for me when I read that model of it, and I went, oh, that just makes so much sense, that like I could just have a spirit come in and do this work for me. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's kind of interesting because I've heard a couple different phrases and terms when it comes to traditional witchcraft and spirits that have functions. So there's obviously the familiar spirit, which we can talk about, but would you consider what you just talked about to be similar to a familiar spirit or like a fetch spirit?
Okay, so kind of all different things. So the way I see like that servitor, that filling of a job position, is it short term. It's not meant to be a long term working relationship. Whereas like a familiar spirit is a spirit that you're going to really put time and effort to build a relationship in, and it's a long term relationship. And then a fetch spirit is actually a part of your own spirit. So you're part of your own soul. So I don't know if you've heard of the tripartite soul. So
Yes, I have.
right, so the idea that we have these three souls, and our lower soul, what I would call our black soul, our cauldron soul, can be sent out separately from our consciousness to sort of do our bidding in this world or the other world. And that's our fetch spirit, but it's kind of intricately linked back to ourselves.
Okay, yes, I do remember reading about that in, I think, The Crooked Path.
Yes, yeah, I think Keldon addresses it there as well.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. And you said that it quit on you?
Yeah. So basically, right, I said, like, I made it's a contract. Like, it's just like you going down to the mall and getting a job to work at, at the McDonald's. You sign the contract that says, I will show up for work and do these things if you pay me this money. And so I had a sort of series of like candle burnings and different things that I was going to do to sort of support this spirit, to pay this spirit while it did these tasks for me. And I ran into some mental health issues and ended up taking 2.5, almost 3 months off. And during that time, didn't consciously realize that I had stopped basically paying my servitor. And one day I come into my office here, and there was it was like kind of a candle stand that I had that was sitting up in a windowsill that was basically thrown off the windowsill down on the ground, like fell apart into a whole bunch of different pieces. And there's no way that would have just naturally fallen off the shelf. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was
Yeah, of
in
course.
an area that I like instantly I was like, how did that? And I went, oh, that is a huge wake up call. That is like my servitor going, psh, you can take your offerings and shove it, because obviously you're not doing them, so you don't need this anymore. Yoink, away it went.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And
Yeah.
so the way that you kind of formed the contract and I guess communicated with the spirit what you wanted, was that through direct contact or divination or dream work, or what would you say the avenue was for that? What's your most, like, in your experience, what has been the most direct form of communication that you have with spirits?
For that spirit, basically what I did was at the, I can't remember now, I believe it was at the full moon, I would give it a new direction. So basically every 30 days on the new moon, or on the full moon, sorry, I would create a sigil that was basically, it had a big project it was working on. And then every month I would give it a little tweak in direction in the form of a sigil. And I would write it into the sigil, and then I would add it to its spirit box. So I created like a spirit box that it would be housed in. And in that spirit box, I had all kinds of different like herbs and essential oils and stones, and I think there's some feathers and all kinds of different things that were sort of tied into this goal. And I put them all into this box that would sort of create an entertaining environment for the spirit to live in. And then every month I would add in a new direction for it. So basically I'd gone like 3 months with no direction, no payment, right? And it just
Yeah, you
went,
left them
oh,
cold. Okay.
right. Just like if you were working for McDonald's and all of a sudden your name's not on the schedule anymore, you're not getting a paycheck. You're like, okay, like
Yeah.
my time here is done. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I've definitely been there before.
yeah.
So I'm curious when it comes to spirits. There's always, like you said, they're, like people. They're good and bad, and I think that's pretty universal of any spirit system. What is your method, and what are some methods that you found to keep yourself safe from spirits that might? And I think this is a lot more rare than people realize, but that might, mean you harm or be dangerous in any way. What is your method of dealing with that? And what do you usually tell new people about when it comes to working with spirits, how to keep yourself safe?
So basically, what I tell people is working with spirits is like working with people. There are good people, there are bad people, there are all kinds of crazy people out in the world. But statistically, what is the likelihood that you're going to be walking down the sidewalk and an ex murderer is going to chase you down and chop your head off? Slim to none. Right? Now, should somebody start running towards you with an axe in the middle of the street, screaming murder at you, do you have tools in your back pocket to deal with that? Absolutely. You are going to turn around, you are going to run, you are going to lock yourself in somewhere safe, right? And it's very, I don't know, to me, it's very similar when you're working with the spirit world. Chances are, statistically, you're not going to end up with some big oogie boogie negative. I find there is so much fear mongering out there, and it's absolutely unwarranted and it's ridiculous. But that being said, when it does come to protections, I do have a familiar spirit whose job is protection and protecting me. I have wards up around my home, right? I do warding to make sure that my home space, the space where I do my work, is kept safe and clean, if you will. But for the most part, I tell people if there's a big baddie, if something's happening and there's something scary happens, go away. Just say, go away. Leave my house. Leave me alone. Go away. And you'd be surprised how effective just that communication can be. I think a lot of times when we see something or we get frightened, I mean, I've had it, right, where I've been doing, say, scrying work, and all of a sudden, right, for no reason, the candle just goes out and I'm sitting in pitch black darkness and it scared me, right? And I just went, go away. Go away. I don't want to deal with this. Go away. And I relit the candle. I turned on the lights in the room. I looked around and I'm like, okay, I'm safe. I'm fine.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that seems to be a very a solid method of keeping yourself safe and keeping away spirits that might mean you harm. And you're right, there is a lot of fear mongering when it comes to the spirit world and spirit work in general.
Yeah, so much. And I think part of it is when we can't explain something 100% scientific fact, here you go, it's very easy to sort of fall back into that fearful state, right? We don't know everything there is to know. It must be bad. But I think it's just as likely that we don't know. It could be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. My only, when it comes to the chthonic spirits and spirits that work, from the Goetia, there's definitely, I view them more as the wolves and bears and lions and tigers of the spirit world. Not that they're evil or that I feel that they're going to steal my soul, but, when you see a bear, you're not worried about it morally, you're worried about it physically ripping you apart. And they're very much the same way. But I think that that's a rare case in the spirit world. I think that they are in a class of their own on that,
Yeah, and I think that when you're just sitting around in your kitchen doing some general spell work, chances are a goetic spirit isn't going to just show up out of nowhere and
from
try
all
to track you down.
Right, from all the research I've done and from all the people I've talked to, they don't really like being here on Earth anyway. So the idea of them, coming around on their own volition is very, very slim. But when it comes,
and I have another question about goetic spirits.
Absolutely.
If you had people calling and commanding you to them, basically like entrapping your soul here, saying you will do these things for me, or I'm like commanding my will upon you, would you be a very happy spirit? Would you be a very happy person?
So that's a good point, and I think that there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to the ceremonial system. Working with goetic spirits is kind of like a really, really intense. Oh, you know what? It's like a job interview or a very intense job where where the spirit is on the lowest of the totem pole. But it's more about like being in court and the spirit is on trial or standing witness. The aggressiveness that is used in the conjurations to get them here is let up a lot in the greeting of the spirit and the petition. You're basically just telling it like, listen, I know that you can, if you wanted to, you could destroy me. I mean, I stand no chance against you. But I have this stuff that you want that you can't get anywhere else. And I need this thing done. I don't really want to be friends with you. You don't want to be friends with me. Let's just see what kind of deal we can do together, and I'll give you what you want, and I'll get what I want, and we'll just go our separate ways. And if it works out, we can keep doing this. So there's definitely like a professional working relationship where you're not trying to get too close, but you're not trying to be too far away either. And that's kind of what the binding is. It's simply just telling it like, listen, I need this thing. I need to make sure that you're going to give me this thing, and I'll give you what you want, but you can't hurt me. Like, I really need you to make sure that you're not going to, pull one over on me. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's a lot of people, when people hear the idea of binding spirits, they immediately think of chains coming up out of the ether and dragging this spirit, holding the spirit down while you, do your conjurations and burn their sigils and things like that. And it's not really like that. It's a lot more official and a lot more formal than that. But I totally understand your point, and I definitely think that
I guess it's just that idea that if you keep a bear in a cage, and then when you go to approach it, what's it going to do? It's going to fight with you because it wants to get out. Whereas if I see a bear out in the middle of the forest and I approach it, it might fight with me, but it also might just roll over and let me scratch its belly, and it might just run away and be like, see you later. I don't want to deal with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And right? I think, yeah.
But when you've got it kept in a cage and it's not happy, you're guaranteed to get confrontational.
Yeah, and if you read the grimoires, they actually do state in certain like sections of the office, like the description of the spirit, this spirit is very bad, it's very evil, it's very, it's angry, it doesn't want to be called. There are some spirits though, it says this is a goodly spirit, it's okay, like it's not gonna mess you up. I mean, you should still bind it so you can know that you're getting what you want, but it's not gonna get upset with you for working with it. So yeah, there is definitely that distinction, but I definitely agree. That's something that I like about witchcraft or traditional witchcraft is it takes a little bit more of a sympathetic view of spirits, at least the spirits that are worked with mostly in traditional witchcraft. And that kind of brings me to a point that I've been curious about is pacts and deals with spirits and how to go about that safely and make sure that, you're not getting the hood pulled over your eyes.
I think for the most part, the work I do with spirits is about building relationships. So if I spend my time working, like it's not necessarily about taking all the time, right? It's about spending that time to build relationships. I teach a foraging class, right? And a really big part, really, really big message that I want people to take from that foraging class is that if you want to build a relationship with the land upon which you live, you can't always be taking. You have to spend time appreciating, you have to spend time giving back, making offerings, building a relationship with that land before you start taking from it, right? And I think it's very much the same with spirits. The spirit work I do, it's about building relationships with them so that they are mutually beneficial. So the spirits will want to help you because they know that by helping you, they're going to get what they want because you've established a relationship of trust.
Absolutely. I really like that. And that's kind of what I do in the spirit work that I do. And the thing that I think people get very hung up about, and this is something I had to do my own research on, is the devil in the context of traditional witchcraft and how that entity is viewed and perceived. And I'm curious if you could talk about your experience with that.
The devil, yeah, that's always a sticking one. You always hear people say, and all the time, especially like on message board, witches don't work with the devil. And I'm like, oh heck, yes they do. But I think there is a very much a misconception about what is the devil. The man in black, old horny, especially when you're looking from like a European background. he's just he's not Satan. He's not the Christian Satan. And some witches work with the Christian Satan. Some witches work with Lucifer. A lot of us work with the devil, but the devil is, yeah, he's like the man in black. He's not he might be a little bit of a trickster, but he's not this negative, nasty entity who's out to like scorch the earth. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions there. I know for me, coming from a Roman Catholic background, I really had a hard time with that, right? That was like, oh, that was probably one of my sticking points with traditional witchcraft. I was like, oh, the devil. I don't know. And you absolutely don't have to work with him in traditional witchcraft, but I was intrigued that so many people did. And so I did some of my research. And what really helped me was Gemma Gary's book, The Devil's Dozen, 13 Craft Rites of the Old One. And love it. Excellent book. And it really sort of helped tweak my mind a little bit around
for me,
what we meant when we were talking about the devil. Yeah, he's an old spirit. And in my view, he's somewhat similar. He's the witch father. He is like similar to the god of my practice.
That's really cool. And I definitely had to do some research because not that I'm not coming from a Christian background, but I do have an understanding of that there are some spirits that are just, you're not gonna, it's more harm than not to work with them. And so I had to do my research, but I came to the same conclusion. And I think the concept of a folkloric devil is really cool and really interesting. And I'm curious if you've, had any, I don't know, do you work with the folkloric devil or?
I do. Okay.
Do you have any notable experiences about working with him?
I find that he's actually, what's the word? Fairly distant. He's not like a pressing spirit in my work.
Okay.
But he's sort of an overseer of it all.
Okay.
It's kind of like when I lead ritual, I'll start it off by saying I do this work in the devil's name. I have pacted with the devil, and I have a routine series of offerings I do throughout the year, right, to maintain that pact with him. And yeah, I really see him sort of as, like I said, as the witch father. So it's like the witch mother and the witch father. And the witch father is the one who sort of takes my hand and leads me down the path, the one who sort of actively oversees exactly what it is that I'm doing, who grants me sort of the powers to do what it is that I do.
That's really awesome. When you said, let's talk about the rituals of traditional witchcraft. Now, I know that there's 3 main rituals that are held within traditional witchcraft or the Cochrane witchcraft tradition, and I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so I know, like, we've got laying the compass, we've got the hoozle, and my brain is totally escaping me. What's the other one?
Treading the mill?
Treading the mill, thank you.
No problem.
Because I don't do that every time, so that's why it's not sticking in my head. All right. So yeah, definitely all things I've done. So yeah, laying the compass is basically, right, you're going to, there's so many different ways to do it, but however you do it, you are basically creating a crossroads, a liminal space in the here and now, that sort of keeps you with one foot in this world and one foot in the other world. It makes it sort of easier to work with and communicate with spirits, and all kinds of crazy stuff. Treading the mill, right? That's where you have your central point, which for a lot of people might be a stang, could be a fire, it could be a cauldron with some sort of working going on in it. And you tread in a circle around this central point, and you keep your eye focus in this central point. And there's a couple of different components that you can add to it. One of them is the lame step. So that's where you drag one of your feet, kind of walk with a limp, and you sort of drag one of your feet along behind you. And the other one is to take your head and tip it back and to the side. It's kind of hard to describe, but you basically tip your head back and to the side. And what you're actually doing is you're restricting a little bit of blood flow. And then as you tread in this circle, it sort of helps you get into this other trance-like mind state so that you can do what it is that you need to do. If you want to communicate or if you want to tread the mill to raise power, there's sorts of all sorts of different outcomes you can kind of choose that you want to get from your working. And then finally, so that's like your working portion. And then you have the hoozle at the end, which is it's sort of a sacrificial meal. And yeah, basically you're sacrificing your bread, your wine to the old ones and partaking of them. And what you'll do is you mix. You have your like offering bowl, which you put some of the bread into, and then you add some of the sacrificed wine to it, and it creates sort of a slurry together, which is sort of a sacrificial fluid that you can then use for blessing and anointing yourself or your tools, etc. But yeah, those are kind of the three main components.
Well, that's awesome. In your experience, have you found that, doing a ritual, using one of those formats and then, coupling it with spell work or anything like that, do you find that it changes the power or adds power to whatever you're doing, or is it more of a symbolic thing without any kind of physical change?
I do find that it does change sort of, what's the word? When I do just general spell work, I don't go to all of the ritual, but when I do ritual, and I do have another group of people I've been working with to do ritual with them, it definitely creates, it's like your brain almost goes into that ritual space, knowing, right, as soon as you start treading the mill, as soon as you start laying the compass, your brain goes, oh, aha, I know where we're going. I know what this leads to. And it's easier to sort of slip into that liminal space, if you will. So I do find it's very helpful, especially in a group setting. I've done a lot of ritual work on my own, and it sort of changes that feeling, but especially when you're working in that group setting with other people, because you're all sort of able to focus and do these steps together, that really ties it all together as a group, if that makes sense. It kind of brings that like group think into play.
Out of all those rituals, which ones have you found to be the most powerful or the most transforming of the three?
For me, the most transforming of the three would be laying the compass. That's at the start of all of our rituals. It's the creation of that space, that sacred space. I think, like, especially when you're outdoors, all space is sacred. I don't think we need to what's the word? We don't need to like cleanse and make spaces nice and neat. I think that existing as they are out in nature, spaces are sacred. But it's laying that compass brings in that, literally builds a crossroads that you can stand on between here and the other world. And to me, that just changes the glamour over the situation. Like, everything just looks a little different once you lay that compass.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And with laying the compass and working with spirits, one of the things that I find really alluring about the idea of working with spirits is that, and this is something I learned through the goetic and ceremonial system, is that for the most part, after you've developed a working way to work and communicate with spirits, a lot of your magic is taught by the spirits to you. And I'm curious if that's been the case in your work as well.
You know what? I don't think I've worked long enough. I don't think I've had a relationship yet that has really kind of gone to that level, but I definitely have studied with others who have had those experiences, most definitely, and I'm looking forward to them. But yeah, that is one of the roles of like a familiar spirit, it can be tutelary, right? To come in and be a spirit who can teach you, who can lead you in new ways, who can spark new ideas. So yeah, I mean, I definitely look forward to that coming, but I haven't actually had that particular experience yet.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I haven't either, but I'm very keen to as well. Um, I think we were talking earlier, and you mentioned about the other world, and one of the things we haven't talked about yet is the Witch's Sabbath, and maybe you could go into what that is and if you've experienced that for yourself.
So the Witch's Sabbath is sort of an otherworldly gathering, right? You jump the hedge, you go to the other world, and it's a gathering of witches, typically, which happens sort of May Eve or at Samhain at the kind of big celebrations. And in the other world, all the fetch spirits of all the witches sort of gather there, and it can serve many different purposes. It can be tutelary, but it's also celebratory. It is, right? Sometimes it's about pledging allegiance. Sometimes it's just about getting to have a good time and to, you know, party, if you will, right? Being able to sort of hang out and enjoy your time with other witches, with other spirits that might be in attendance. Oftentimes the devil might be there, or the Queen of Elfame. And yeah, that's I'm not the most well versed on all of the ins and outs. Great book by Keldon, The Witch's Sabbath by Keldon.
Yeah, I have it. I just have not dug into it yet, but I'm very excited to do it as well.
Haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
But I know I have done through I just initiated into a spiral castle tradition of American folkloric witchcraft, and they do have sort of path workings, or like similar to a guided meditation, and path working that happens at May Eve to go to the other world and enjoy the Witch's Sabbath. So I've definitely gone through that, which was, I mean, yeah, it was interesting. I kind of hung back. It wasn't really what would you call it? A full immersion for me. I kind of got to a certain point where I was like, okay, I'm only comfortable going so far, but we're getting there. Next year we'll go a little closer.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. That is one thing that I'm very, very interested in about traditional witchcraft, is because I've wanted to astral travel my entire life and I've never quite figured it out. And it seems like traditional witchcraft has a couple good, surefire methods to get into that space.
Yeah, definitely. And I know I've seen lots of different sort of ways of different ways of sort of categorizing it, and how do you get there, and methods for doing it. There's all sorts of different ideas out there. And I found, some have worked for me, some of them really have not. But I know for me, like the kind of path working guided meditation stuff is always like, I'm good with that. And I've had very, very good results with that.
That's awesome. I would definitely like to try that out. Going into some of like the tools of traditional witchcraft. Now, I know that traditional witchcraft is notable because it doesn't have a lot. It doesn't use a lot of physical items to accomplish its goal. But one of the big ones that you see a lot is obviously the broom and the stang. And this was very new to me. I had never heard of this until I just gotten into reading about witchcraft and traditional witchcraft. And I'm curious what you could tell us about that.
So the stang it's basically like a tall staff with a fork at the top with two tines. It is meant to sort of represent the witch father in your liminal space, if you will. It's also, it is used like a wand or an athame to direct energy. So like when you're laying your compass, the tradition that I'm part of, one of the rounds is you actually drag the stang around the circle and use that to sort of direct your energy down into the earth to create this compass space. And it stands for, so many different things. Of course, now I'm totally blanking. It can be your altar. So you can set it, some people set it in the center of their compass. Some people put it in the north. And, you can set things around the base of it to be, to function as an altar. You can decorate it with seasonal, garlands and flowers and that type of thing. Some people actually like hang arrows that will face in different directions in different ways to sort of signify the differing times of year. Some people will hang like animal skull on it or an old shirt on it, again to represent the devil or Old Horny. There's all different things you can do with a stang. Yeah, it's yeah, for the sort of more European British Isles type traditional witchcraft, the stang is very, very prevalent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a cool and very evocative symbol. I really like it. And I'm assuming that's yours in the back there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
that
looks really cool.
I have a few.
Okay, yeah. I need to go
It
hiking and
becomes a
get
bit of an
some.
obsession.
Yeah. No, I could definitely understand that. I mean, collecting sticks, that's one of my favorite hobbies as well.
Yeah, it was funny. I spent a year looking for one and could never find one. And then the next year just stumbled across one and that was great. And then the next year found like four of them. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they're just like coming out of the woodworks at me now. So
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite things about your channel are the book reviews. And one in particular is Robin Artisan's The Cloven Stone Workings, and you actually did a couple videos about the experiences and experiments you did from within the book, and I'm curious if you could go into a little detail about that.
yeah, so to start with, I did that was an interesting book review to do. I thought the workings themselves were very interesting. I found the tone of the book, the tone of the author to be again that fear mongering and
Yeah, he goes a little bit. He's
much.
very intense, and
Yeah.
I can understand why a lot of people were kind of put off by that.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, if I had been newer, I would have been like, no, psh, like, just I don't think I would have even looked at it. But I was like, I know Robin Artisan is a big name in traditional witchcraft, like
Absolutely, yeah.
very, very well known for his contributions to traditional witchcraft. So I was like, okay, we're just gonna like bear with it and see. We'll get to the workings and see what that really has to do. Um, so yeah, I thought they were very interesting. I definitely noticed things happening. You do the original, the first, I believe it's like the what does he call it? Like mundane
Yeah,
scrying,
mundane or profane scrying.
profane scrying, right? So that was a very interesting experience. And then I was doing like the scrying exercises. And that was one of the exercises where I actually had like just, I mean, literally, I haven't moved. I'm sitting in an enclosed room with no windows and just poof, like candles went out. And that spooked me. I was like, whoa. So that was definitely interesting. And then when we got to the whole, so you do that, and then there's the whole sequence of right, making the pact and then spending asking for it's not so much a message, but asking basically for like a message or a confirmation to come through in your dreams.
Right, yeah.
And when I was doing that dream work, what I found was very interesting. My son, who has always suffered night terrors, but had actually been sort of growing out of it, all of a sudden, the first night, boom, those night terrors were back with a vengeance. And I was like, oh my Lord. So I did have to up all of the warding around my son's room. He's very sensitive to, I don't know if I want to say spirits, but I was the same when I was very small. Like I could just see things in the dark all the time. And he just sees things in the dark all the time. And I was like, oh, good grief. I don't know what this poor boy is having these nightmares now. So we upped the warding around his room, and that solved that problem. And then I really felt like I was not getting a response in my dreams. And I'll be honest, I'm not a good dreamer. I'm not good with dream work. And so I redid the pact. He said, if you don't get a response, you can do it again. So I thought, okay, I'll do it again. And that first night I had this vicious dream. I was literally standing in this office facing over towards that closet. And I looked down, and my dog, I have a black dog, she was down on the floor, and she looked up at me and was just like, ugh, and like just exploded up towards my face and was like, enough.
Yeah, that
And I
sounded
like,
very intense when you were telling it on your channel.
yeah, and I woke, like I startled awake. I was like, whoa. And I'm like, oh, snap. I just got told. Basically, yes, like your pact was accepted. Enough. Like, stop. Just enough. We
Yeah.
heard you. So yeah, that was pretty visceral.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that was so we did that, and then I think his next work was working was dream work, and I just kind of left it off there. That was the end of that. I was like, okay, I'm satisfied with the results I've had from this. Reported back to YouTube, was like, yep, okay, I think this is legit stuff. This is pretty good. I got the results. So
Yeah,
I love
absolutely. And do you feel that the exercises in the books that you were doing, has that impacted your magic and your witchcraft to, after the fact?
yeah, well, I really felt like that was where I made my my pact with the devil, if you will, right? That was where I was like, okay, like this, like I heard, I got the response. I'm like, we're good. And that has absolutely flavored sort of everything that's come after. That's when I added in that I do this work in the devil's name whenever I'm doing any sort of ritual or spell work, that kind of thing. And so yeah, it's definitely had an influence on how I practice.
Well, that's
Most
really
certainly.
awesome because I'm going to start doing the beginning on Sunday, and I'm very excited to get into that as kind of my break into witchcraft.
Yeah. And like the scrying sessions, I did those along with part of my, my first year of studies for this tradition. There was also a scrying segment, so I sort of did them in combination, and it definitely, I feel like, helped. What's the word? I'm not big on scrying.
That's
I
okay.
can I can absolutely do it. It's interesting. I get some interesting visuals. It's like, okay, but to actually sit down and try to figure out what it all means is just more work than I want to put into something.
Right.
To be
Yeah.
fair, but it definitely helped me get through that bit of schoolwork. The two kind of they really link together really well. So I feel like, yeah, I definitely learned a lot from working through those first exercises for sure.
The scrying that he has you doing after because the first 3 days of the scrying in the beginning, you aren't trying to contact anything. You're just simply really talking to your subconscious there. And I think after that, the next dark glass or scrying stuff, you are trying to make contact with spirits. And I'm curious if that was, if you were successful and if you got anything very identifiably other coming through when you were doing the later one.
You know what? I honestly don't remember. I would have to go back to my book and look it up. I don't remember how far I got with the scrying. I don't remember having anything particularly other come through
Oh, okay.
that I could, but maybe I don't even remember if I did them now that you say that. I'd have to go back and actually read through my notes.
Okay.
I
All
do
right.
a lot of I did a lot of scrying work around that time, so I'm not sure how much was with his book and how much was with my other method,
Right.
and what results were from who.
Okay. Very cool. Well, that kind of brings us to the part that I always love is the experiences, both within your witchcraft and your practice and out of it, just kind of in mundane life when you're not even thinking about it. So, what are some of the crazy, strange experiences you've had both with your practice and out of it?
Um, let's see. I think one of the coolest was last year at Samhain. I did like a full like Samhain ritual, and it was sort of about tracing back your ancestry, your lineage, and there was like a reciting your lineage portion, and then it was enlivening a skull. So I have like a resin skull. It was about like enlivening that skull, and sitting with it, I literally felt it warm within my hands and become something almost human. And it linked back to one of my ancestors. And it was like I was literally sitting with them in a field, holding their head in my hands, talking to them. And it was so tactile. Like I can still feel her hair in between my fingers. you know? And that was a absolutely amazing experience. And another one that I tend to have a lot is when I'm out walking around, what's the word? It's like I'll almost see a portal. So the way I see going to the other world, this is a little bit out there, but there's all sorts of different methods to visualize it, and a lot of them are like climbing a hedge or flying over a hedge or jumping over a wall, and none of them ever worked for me. And it just didn't make sense in my brain. I just couldn't make it work. And what I ended up going back to is I don't know if you've ever played Minecraft.
I've played it once or twice. I'm a little bit after, like that came after my time.
Yeah, I have a little boy, so I play a lot of Minecraft. And you make a portal to the netherworld, and you basically put these obsidian blocks together. You light it, and this room, like this purple portal, and you step into the portal and everything waves, and then you step through into in the game into the netherworld. And the way I view going to the other world is very similar to my experiences with the Minecraft portal. It's almost like stepping into this portal, and everything, so you can see the mundane world on either side of you, and it's like everything kind of starts to wave and dissolve, and then you step out and you are in the other world. And what I see are, when I'm out walking around, is I will see these like portals. There's one in a particular spot at the dog park that I go to, and I'm always sort of tempted to like jump in and see where it takes me.
I would say you should absolutely jump in at least once and see where it goes.
A couple of times I've sort of tempted, and I've kind of like gone through it, but I've never stayed and lingered and really spent the time to like let the world around me sort of melt away and step through. But yeah, that's something I always play with when I don't see them often, but every once in a while you'll just see that perfect setup where you're like, oh, there's a portal. And yeah.
Well, that's really awesome. I would very much like to see a portal when I'm walking around.
Yeah, it's not like seeing it like with my eyes. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know.
Energetically seeing it, like I know it's there. I can feel it. I just haven't quite been able to access it yet.
Yeah, of course. Have you had any kind of strange spirit contact without doing any magic, just kind of out and about in your daily life?
You know what? I haven't. I am also I've got ADHD, and
I do too.
Yeah, I don't tend to sit still long enough to like ever, like I don't notice things around me. I'm very much in my head all the time. So no, I can't say that I have. And to be fair, if there were a spirit, they would literally have to probably jump like right in front of me for me to even notice it was there. And as we know, spirits are much more subtle than that.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I don't know that I would pick up on it if there were something, to be fair.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. And I identify with that because I do have ADD, and it is very hard for me to really like experience the world around me and not get too lost in my own head.
Yeah, I do. I tend to spend more time living up in the ether than I do being sort of grounded here. That's actually one of the things I do try to work on, is to sort of be more present in my body, to be, physically here, mindful and present, and some more.
Well, we're coming down to the end here, but I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about what you have in store for your channel, what the future is, what are some of the plans that you would like to enact into what you do on YouTube. And
Sure.
With your practice as well, if there's anything new or interesting that you're looking at or researching to upgrade your practice, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, definitely. What am I doing? Actually, that's interesting you mentioned that. Just this morning, I registered for Scottish Gaelic classes. I'm going to take them online through a college out in Nova Scotia. And that has been part of my practice since January, was making a sort of a commitment to my ancestors that as part of that sort of veneration, that I would learn their language. And so I just started on Duolingo, and I'm kind of, plunking along through Duolingo. I've done, I think, 221 days in a row, which is kind of fun. but I thought, I'm not like I'm learning, but like Duolingo it's not the best. So I thought,
Yeah,
you know what? I'm going to take like a proper class. And so it's a Gaelic college out in Nova Scotia that offers online classes. It's 3 hours of instruction a week in Scots Gaelic. So
that's
that
awesome.
is, yeah, it is kind of funny, right? Because a lot of people would think, well, that's not witchcraft. But it is part of my witchcraft practice. It's part of honoring my ancestors and, again, building a relationship with those ancestral spirits is, to say, hey, I'm going to take time out of my day to go and learn about what it is that, how you guys used to live and how, maybe what your language was. So just started that. Like I said, I just initiated into my first year of the Spiral Castle tradition, which is kind of exciting. It took me 17 months to do my year and a day, my first year of studies. And then I've also started into my second year of studies. And so it's kind of exciting. I just did my initiation last week. And my YouTube channel, I don't have a lot that I plan on changing. I just want to continue to just sort of share my thoughts, share my opinions. And I'm not so much a like, here, let me show you how to do this spell or that. Like, I don't do a lot of instructional videos. They're more
Yeah, I
like
kind of like that. I like the way you
thought
do that.
videos, right? It's like thought videos. This is what I'm thinking about this thing at this time. And, hey, my thoughts and opinions on things change over time. And so my videos kind of reflect that. And, but yeah, I intend to just sort of keep that up, keep that growing. And then the other big project I have when it comes to my witchcraft is I've actually started a guild here in Edmonton, Alberta, the Edmonton Traditional Witchcrafters Guild, to sort of get out and meet other traditionally minded witches in my city and sort of create a community here. We have a very strong Wiccan community here. And I just really felt like I don't want to take up space in a community that I know it's not my jam. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that's fair for me to take up a space when there might be somebody out there who really would appreciate that so much more. So I thought, well, then maybe I need to start this community that I was looking for. And so, yeah, I'm busy. I do teach classes through there. We're going to have our fall lineup of classes coming out early next week. That'll be it's all about customizing your witchcraft practice and all that kind of good stuff. So,
Well, that's really
I've
cool.
always got lots on the go.
Yeah, and it's interesting about the Scots Gaelic. My on my father's side, specifically his mother, her side of the family is Irish, or not Irish, is Italian, but also Manx. And I have considered learning Manx Gaelic because it's slight variation because it is a dying language. But that's really cool that you have that program near you.
Yeah, well, and it's not even really near me.
Or online at least.
But that you can take it online, I think is so exciting because I don't know that I don't know if that's just since COVID or if they've always offered it online. But yeah, I was really excited to find that it's like, I love languages. So I'm really excited to get to learn something new but have proper instruction on it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I had never heard of this Spiral Castle witchcraft. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So there is a really excellent YouTube channel everyone should check out. It's called Blade and Broom with a lovely lady named Lorelei Black. And Lorelei Black and her former partner, they founded the Spiral Castle tradition of American folkloric witchcraft. And it's basically just a traditional witchcraft tradition, but she does a lot of, on her YouTube channel, she does a lot of like teaching style videos, a lot of really good informational videos about traditional witchcraft. And yeah, anybody that wants to learn her tradition can do so. She has links under her videos to like her Etsy store where you can actually purchase your first year, and it's an entire package of like, here's everything you need to know in all the exercises to go through to complete your first year of studies. So it's very comprehensive, and yeah, I've really, really enjoyed doing it. And I've learned, it's funny, I've learned a lot, but more in in a way that, like, I mean, I kind of knew about lots of this stuff, but to sit down and formally study, like, ethics. How often do we think about our ethics?
Right, yeah.
We all are like, yes, I have ethics, I'm an ethical person, but when's the last time you had to, like, quantify your ethical stance?
Not in a long time.
It's one of the first exercises is to write an ethics page, right? Where do you stand on what are your ethics in witchcraft?
Well, that's a really thought-provoking exercise. That's something I think is really valuable.
Yeah, it's just a very well put together course. She used to be an English teacher, and it shows, you know.
Yeah, very clearly. Well, Taya, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about your experiences with traditional witchcraft and giving me and my listeners some education in the subject.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been like the time has just flown by.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Why is he ending it? What? Oh yeah, it's been an hour.
Yeah. But thank you so much, and you are welcome to come on again anytime you want. If you have any new projects going on or something like that you'd like to share, please reach out.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. You have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
No problem. Bye. And that was my interview with Taya Kennedy. I really enjoyed having her on the show, and I loved learning all about traditional witchcraft. You can check her out on her YouTube channel. The link will be in the description below. As always, folks, I will see you again on the Strange Dominions.